Are you ready to explore how people coordinate, to build and empower your community, to take action and solve problems, to coordinate without any central authority? What? Bringing in the OGs of the pre-crypto decentralized coordination space together with the pioneers of the cutting-edge technologies to fuse their ancient knowledge with the latest tools in order to fight coordination failures, slay Moloch, and continue the endless search for the holy grails of decentralized coordination. Welcome to the front lines of coordination. Fuck. My brain is already melting. I hope you survive. Welcome, Dekan. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Yeah, I'm gonna do a quick intro for those who don't know Dekan. Dekan is a Daoist, as pure as they come, from the Metacartel, one of the three founders of RaidGuild, of DAOhaus as well, and all three are some of the longest running DAOs around. He's experienced in the grant giving DAOs, in service DAOs, in project DAOs, even the project DAO that's building a platform DAO. He's 100% community oriented and overall one of my favorite people in the space. And happy to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
Do you want to tell a bit more about yourself before we go on?
Yeah, I think you covered pretty good. I've been in the DAO space for a while now, and it was kind of saw the rebirth of DAOs when everyone was recovering from the PTS DAO from the DAO, and when Moloch came out, and then Metacartel and RaidGuild and all these kind of the explosion of that first wave of DAOs. So full-time work in the space now, mainly work on DAOhaus and do all types of governance and decision-making and community type experiments. It's a lot of fun.
Cool. Yeah, so how has your view or the understanding of the DAOs, like how DAOs work, changed over the past 3 years?
We saw like those initial experiments, and it was kind of people. It was really a small group of people that were interested in figuring out some of these solutions around decentralized governance, digital communities. But we saw the opportunity there, I guess, and also the just how cool it could be. Like we had people from all over the world working on different projects, coming together on different purposes and initiatives, meeting in chat rooms or meeting at events, or doing finding different ways to kind of come together and coordinate around something. And we all talked about what a DAO was, but it was just hard to really make it happen. So it started off with just kind of like a bunch of experiments, a bunch of people that were kind of just nerds in the kind of governed space. And that was a lot of fun. I mean, there was a lot of people just like really that wanted to see this stuff work and really wanted to see a decentralized version of it work, and knew that it was going to be hard, and that the UX would be hard, and there was no UIs really to mess around with this stuff. We were just playing with smart contracts and doing things through command line or block explorers. And then slowly things just started to pick up, and people started building more and more tools. And then I think something happened this last year where the DAO kind of meme, it started infecting other people. And then it just totally exploded, where everything is a DAO now, right? Every Twitter handle, every new project has DAO in their Twitter handle. But I still think that some of that core work and early work that we did is really important, and there's still people working on it, but a lot of it's kind of been maybe sacrificed for convenience. And so I think that surfaced this idea of digital organizations and how awesome it can be, but the idea of decentralization and resiliency and robustness and anti-capture has kind of been forgotten. But there's still a lot of people working on it, on those things. And I think it may be getting another resurfacing again, where these people have kind of like dipped their toes in, like, oh, this is really cool. Like we can vote on things and then do things with cryptocurrencies and do things in a like trustless way, or maybe we have a delegated team that are doing things. But how could we take it to the next level and do something actually like really core to the values of decentralization? So yeah, I guess that's kind of like how I've seen over the last 3 years things progress. Went from a really traumatic situation where everyone was anti-DAO, anti-token, anti things like that, to a bunch of experimentation and kind of relighting the fire to a total explosion of not DAOs, but on the right path of getting closer.
Right. Yeah, everything is a DAO these days. But it's better than everything not being a DAO, or at least,
Yeah.
I mean, when everything is not really a DAO, but posing as a DAO, that's not good either. But, how before we had every year was like, this year is the year of the DAOs. This year is the year of the DAO. And then it never was. And now it actually finally was.
Yeah, I think it's coming around. It's still like the year of the DAO turned out to be more of these kind of pseudo DAOs, but it's just, the tech is still just coming, and so every week there's new cool things happening. So it'll get there eventually, where normal people like to use this stuff too.
I hope so.
Recently, I've been seeing this kind of thing where it's like a group of people, and I think they're lawyers, are pushing that DAOs are actually companies. But I don't think DAOs are companies. I guess they could be, but if they're anything, they lean more towards like a nation. So it's not like you're an employee of a DAO. You're more like a citizen, right? And I was thinking about this morning because I was reading someone's tweet. And it's just like the narrative is getting like pushed so far in the wrong direction, where it's like every smart contract should be having like a legal contract incorporated with it too, and and the jurisdiction has to be stated, and all these things. It's like, but really what we should be going for is millions of different kind of sovereign nations where every person is a citizen of maybe hundreds or thousands of different nations. And as an individual, you have the sovereignty to move however you want. You have the sovereignty to use your money however you want. You have the sovereignty to like form in these groups and understand where like the public goods for these groups are and how you're funding them. And there's like, we're already paying taxes. I don't know, I'm getting down into this other thing. So, but the infrastructure for this, I'm going off on a tangent, but I think it's something interesting. It's like, where did this brigade of lawyers come in and say like, oh, we know what a DAO is and we can make it work with the current system, when really we're at the core, we're trying to reinvent the system, right? And make people think of things different.
Yeah, not just retrofit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely don't like this whole trend of people explaining DAOs as like online companies. So it's just like an online LLC. It's like, yeah, it's just, I think it started with this whole trend of like progressive decentralization and like governance tokens. And it's like, okay, so that's like shares. So these are companies, and then DAOs are online corporations. And it's like, can we not go there, please?
Yeah, it might be easier to wrap your head around, or maybe easier just to feel like, or it's not a big shift, right? It's easy to just be like, oh, okay, yeah, an online company. And, it gives out grants, and the people who receive the grants are employees. And of course, then they're going to need 1099s and KYC, and the company is going to need to pay taxes. And maybe, we aren't to the point where the tech can really like separate itself from that current system. And maybe this is like a transitional kind of period. But, yeah, in the long run, I think it could be something much different and much more powerful and much more revolutionary.
Yeah, for me, the biggest component is really that I see DAOs as this sort of more community built, community organized organization, not just like companies with shareholders. And a lot of people call their token holders, so like every token holder is a community member, and that's kind of things are getting pushed into like a single bucket when it's not necessarily the case, like as we've seen with a lot of these
NFT projects and a lot of DAOs that are just token based. You see, like as the bear market came, there's no more community because it wasn't a real community, it was just token holders.
Yeah. The way these groups are starting, there's a big variety of how they start, which makes sense. Communities start in different ways. Yeah. So sometimes there's like a current online community that kind of DAOs up. Maybe they do a token launch or an NFT launch and fund a treasury, and then everyone who's holding a token is like in the DAO, or if you buy the token off an exchange, you're in a DAO, or someone sends it to you, you're in a DAO. I think there's something definitely to that. It's like the first step, but what those usually end up leaning on is like a group of one person or a group of people that are really pulling the strings. And so that opens up like those central points of failure where even if it's like a multi-sig, which is better than, just some guy holding a wallet, but there's issues of just like disaster recovery. Like if all those people are at a conference together and it gets hit by a meteor, then is the DAO dead? I don't know. So yeah, these huge treasuries that were bootstrapped in different ways, it's also kind of an interesting thing. Like I kind of want to see treasury-less DAOs. It seems like every initiative could be bootstrapped or crowdfunded in a way that there doesn't even need to be a treasury in a DAO. There's also like the treasury maybe is just like some kind of revenue. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. This treasury-less DAO is something that I was thinking about a lot, which maybe a lot of them are treasury-less now just because of burning through their initial funds or something. But I think there's something there, like raising money and having a runway is important, but maybe there's a way to actually do that without having a treasury. I don't know. Or having it more localized to initiatives. Yeah, I mean, I can just blab on about stuff. So,
We've been trying to do it like for the past 3 years in metagame. Like we never had a treasury, but we had the token which we kept minting, which is kind of as a treasury. Like the DAO itself doesn't have any tokens, but they can be minted into existence. So it's kind of like it has it. So it's still a treasury. So
yeah, that's a good point. So that really, I think there's a lot of DAOs that are in that structure where it's mainly this token that's capturing some kind of value and then being used as a form of reward and things like that.
what would you say are some of the biggest lessons for you, like over the past 3 years?
One of the things that I think in the DAOs that I've been a part of that I see as something that kind of is a problem is just the operational overhead. And then kind of what spins out of that usually turns into kind of bureaucratic in-groups. And so because the DAO tech is still fairly complex. I mean, it's not complex, but it takes a little bit of like learning about MetaMask or learning about smart contracts. And so there's usually a group of people that know how that works, and then everyone else. And so that group of people then a lot of times put themselves in this like operator position. And that position is actually super powerful. Even if they're not huge stakeholders, they really hold the keys to the kingdom. There's a lot of trust that is laid on them by the people that aren't like as involved. So I see that as one problem. And it's one that's kind of hard to get around at this point. Another one is with kind of still with ops, but more like general procedural ops. So a lot of coordination of a large group takes a lot of coordination, and it takes a group of people to kind of like set up schedules and run meetings and write procedures and make sure things are being followed through or check up on things in the future. And that sometimes ingrains those people also into this group that isn't going to go away. And then they also have kind of like monthly costs on how much it's going to be, and those costs go up, and then their group can grow, and like the procedures get laid on top of each other, and you get just a big bureaucratic mess. So that's another thing that I think it's important to try to kind of go towards the ungovernance side of things, because if we really want everyone involved and being a part of these things, then it needs to be kind of a group effort. Yeah, so I don't know if that necessarily makes sense the way I said it, but there's something to it because I've seen it happen several times. Yeah, other lessons, it's all like about the people and about the narrative and about the meme and things like that. And so it's important the way that people come in thinking about these things, and different DAOs have different purposes. And so if the DAO's purpose is like number go up, then that's one thing. If its purpose is to plant 1 billion trees, then that's another thing. I think sometimes DAOs don't have that high level purpose. And if you don't have like a guiding set of principles and kind of like a roadmap, very high level objectives to kind of reach those goals, then the emergent chaotic factor of DAOs, which is super powerful, but can also get just totally out of control sometimes. And having those high level objectives where people can kind of direct their emergent kind of initiatives. So everyone's maybe driving buses in different directions, but they're all going to the same destination, basically. That's another thing I think that is super important and missed sometimes. Sometimes it's just like, hey, we're all in a chat room. Now we're in a DAO. But if you don't set that high level objective and kind of forward-looking roadmap, things can kind of spin out of control. Yeah.
Right, just a mess of divergence of a lot of people pushing in different directions, and the treasury kind of becomes the honeypot that people can just tap into and go off without necessarily doing strategic stuff.
Yeah, and that has other consequences where people get a little complacent about what proposals and what funds are being spent on and what proposals are being made.
Right. And on the previous point, like with the growth of bureaucracy, how do you think that kind of stuff is avoided? Like how is governance minimized?
It's kind of a problem of scale in general, and I think this is just a problem of any kind of organization. When you start small, like less than 10 people, it's pretty easy to manage that overhead and to manage the kind of information asymmetries that happen and things like that. But as it scales, you kind of have to look inward and think about how things need to change, because what you're doing with 10 people isn't going to work with 30 people. And what you're doing with 30 people isn't going to work with 100 plus people, and or thousands of people or tens of thousands of people. So I think some self-reflection as you're scaling on some of the governance overhead that has been injected, and trying to pull that back every once in a while, or introduce maybe something that is a little less heavy on requiring a specific group to do something. I think some of the experiments around meta governance, delegation, and things like that, different governance groups, are interesting ways. Work streams, sub DAOs or sibling DAOs, and things like that to see so this stuff can scale kind of out a little better as it's scaling up, and instead of just getting into these kind of bureaucracy traps.
Right. It seems that a lot of DAOs are moving to this sort of a work streams or raids or pods, however we want to call them, model where these different groups can submit proposals for what they want to do for the DAO, and then they can get evaluated on those results, rather than having this whole one monolithic organization with multiple teams inside.
I really like the retroactive grading kind of events, where you could have a work stream run on an initiative, and through some kind of metric, they can be graded in the future so they may be able to run in a more kind of autonomous or smaller group that has a little more like flexibility and freedom. And then in the future, the DAO might be able to look back through some signaling or like on-chain kind of meta governance to grade and reward these kind of things. I kind of like that because it informed, like, it's the way for the DAO to kind of learn from itself and the things it's doing. A lot of times DAO initiatives get spun out and then that's it. Like maybe they ship, maybe they don't, maybe they accomplish something, maybe not. Maybe the DAO never hears from the initiative again and just doesn't know how it added or created value. So being able to have retroactive periods of these retroactive grading events, I think, are a good way to do that, to help with that.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. Like having, maybe it's another work stream that who's proposing to do this sort of evaluation of other stuff that's happening. But yeah, just having it like a mandatory part of the proposal. Like you don't propose just what you're gonna do, but you also propose how you're gonna measure success, and like you like also guarantee that you will come back after 6 months and say, okay, this is what happened. Like this was the outcome. Because a lot of the times, what I notice in other DAOs is that they would give out these grants, and then people go off, and then there was no like feedback loop going back to like get the data of what happened with the grant, like how was the money spent, what was the outcome, and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, those feedback loops are super important, I think. It's hard because you have, with kind of membership in a DAO being so liquid, you get these, people coming and going, or people, with different incentives for joining. Some people are like looking at it more speculative. Some people are looking at it more with some like purpose alignment. With that many different perspectives all coming together, there's going to be problems. But I guess another interesting thing is with kind of seasonal leadership kind of changes. Sometimes it's kind of structured, and sometimes it really seems more emergent. Like there's kind of the Genesis cohort of a DAO, and they do a lot of work to kind of set the scene, then maybe move on to something else, or, aren't like 100% involved like they were. And then what emerges a lot of times is another group that kind of, maybe it's like an access of political, a specific platform or something, like emerges and starts steering things in a different direction. Actually, I think that's pretty cool. Actually, it's interesting to see how you get like the evolution of DAOs from one thing to maybe something completely different over time, just based on the people that are really deciding to go drive the bus for that moment,
Right. Yeah, I guess part of the problem there is like sometimes like, I mean, especially in DAOs that are token governed, then as you get this entrenched power of people who have a lot of tokens, then it becomes hard for new people to come in and like sort of take leadership.
Yeah, that's always kind of a tricky thing, because you had the people who invested a lot of time and effort and passion into getting something started, and so they end up with a larger amount of power, but really they kind of deserve it because they started all that. That can make it harder for new members that are trying to get involved and feel like they have any say if that initial group just kind of pushes everyone around. There's also, there's kind of these ways of having power decay over time with inactivity, or having kind of dilution through new members, like greater distribution, and all these things can really help kind of level that playing field. But it's always going to be an issue, I think, and it's a hard one because the people who take the initiative to start something maybe deserve to have a little more power and say the way things go.
Yeah, definitely agree. Like it's fair that people who are here the longest, who put in the most effort, have the most say.
Have the most skin in the game, really, too, in a way. But it can eventually get to a point where it's like, maybe it's just a large capital investment that happened at the very beginning. And so then your initiative or your incentive or your game is really just to find the best point to exit, which can really hurt a community if it's all relying on like some token liquidity or something. But if your skin in the game is through actually like working your ass off and like narrowing down these objectives and purpose, then maybe that's a different kind of thing, right? But it could also maybe hamper the DAO from evolving if it's like this kind of conservative group of people that want to keep everything the way it was at the start and not see any like evolution.
Right. I mean, it's easy now that like most DAOs are, I mean, yeah, right now most DAOs are less than a year old. Like we have DAOs that are over 3 years old, and even that's not very long. But thinking like 5 or 10 years, then like this power can really become fossilized, where these people from the beginning have a lot of power, but they're not necessarily thinking most clearly. Maybe they're not even contributing anymore, just being this sort of armchair philosopher trying to keep things the way that it used to be in the old days, that sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
I guess we don't have that problem yet.
Well, yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how, I mean, because we've seen it happen in Metacartel and RaidGuild and some of the older DAOs we've seen kind of shifts in purpose and shifts in active leadership. And then at some points, people are like, this isn't what we started the DAO for. This is something different now. Is the DAO actually different at that point? Has it been like captured maybe for good by a different group? I don't know. Is that okay? Or is it something where it's like it no longer aligns with the initial brand and should be rebranded to something else? I don't know.
Yeah, the way that we're gonna try to experiment with solving this problem is just have it so that like the power is 50% based on all-time contributions from the beginning until now, and then the 50% of the power is based on like the past 3 months of contributions. And then we'll see how that plays out. We'll adjust it over time.
Yeah, that seems cool.
And we've also like been playing it in seasons, so like every 3 months we have this seasoning ceremony where we talk about like do a big retrospective on the past 3 months and like talk about what we want to do in the next 3 months. And then each of the people who want to take these sort of leadership positions have to write new proposals for how they want to like lead their part of the project forward in the next 3 to 6 months. And then this can also like create this natural point in time when new people can come in and say, okay, this season I want to like try to champion something, and then they can write their own proposal. And it's not just like they don't have to like attack one person and try to take their position, but more so at this point in time it's an open position, like it naturally becomes open, and then anybody can submit a new proposal.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see that in a lot of the DAOs that have been around for a while. They're trying to incorporate these periods of reflection and goal setting, I guess, or so a little goal setting and sense making kind of stuff happening where you can do these retroactive kind of things and you can set high level objectives. And the one thing I've been kind of cautious of, or what we'll run into initially, I think, is the process overhead that we're injecting with that kind of stuff. Someone has to set the schedule. Someone has to like open the meeting to have this review. So I think what will be cool is if these things start getting codified into like the way the DAO mechanics work, and that the retroactive reviews are built into it, and they just happen. Like I think meetings and stuff are really important for community building and alignment, but they're also very heavy on the overhead side. And so it's like, can a DAO work without a chat room and a weekly meeting, and I think it'll be interesting to see, and especially as things scale. I mean, it's just not feasible to have 10,000 people in a meeting to like share their retroactive insights. But maybe some of this like meta governance stuff can help with that.
Yeah, and just the overall number of calls, like I know we didn't even have that many teams, and we already had like 10 calls per week or something during the peak, and it was like, oh my god, like there's just too many calls to happen. So we try to slash that down to 4 calls now, and it's much easier. But it's a fine balance, because if you like make it really just all async and it's just all just about work and no this sort of meeting overheads, then it's hard to also grow a community and like have like develop this relationship between the people.
Yeah, I like the way that something like Nouns has approached it as more of this kind of like a brand community, which was something that we talked about a lot a few years ago. And it's all about like these initiatives that are spinning out, and if they're on brand, then they're good. And like those initiatives can have meetings, but at the global level, it's a pretty easy question. Is it on brand or not? And so there's not really a need to like have like giant governance meetings and weekly sessions. And like at that kind of global DAO level, the governance should probably be as minimal as possible and really like take advantage of power of of the numbers, of the signaling power of numbers. For that's another kind of goes into the lessons learned thing. If every single thing the DAO does and every single proposal goes through this one single entity, and every on-chain event and everything, every like transfer of funds and every like work group is all under this one thing where everyone's voting on it, it just becomes like context overload or proposal fatigue, where people just stop paying attention because it's like just voting on 35 proposals a day.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to the idea of like having DAOs without treasuries, and then it's all about value alignment, and then each project can just go out and raise funding for their own project, for their own initiative. That doesn't need to like all go to this one huge DAO.
Yeah, I really like that idea a lot. I think there's a lot of cool things that could happen where it was like maybe the DAO has a small treasury and can help kind of supplement some funding, but if each initiative had their own kind of way to like bring together the people that want to see that initiative happen, like that it's going to take work and money. I think that's really interesting.
I wanted to talk about stress testing, but now I'm considering skipping it. But maybe you do want to mention at least like one or two cool experiments. I know that you did a lot of stress testing and trying to really break DAOhaus as you were building it, and I thought that was really cool. And yeah, maybe some of the coolest experiments that you run in trying to.
Yeah, we had some good ones and some bad ones for sure. This last month we did DAOsumber, which was kind of cool. We did a week of just kind of hacking on random ideas with DAOhaus v3 with some pretty cool different things like different DAO onboarders, different meta governance things, like delegate kind of workflows, data gathering things, reporting. But yeah, I mean we've had different experiments that have kind of failed in the past, and trying to kind of find the limits of Moloch DAOs in general. Moloch DAOs have a specific aspect of like kind of optimistic voting, which works well to keep like the DAO going. You're not having a quorum that can block proposals, and really it just takes one person voting yes for a thing to pass, and as long as no one votes no. So we've had some periods where we've like tried to shorten down the voting periods. So there's also like in the general like normal DAO governance, it's kind of a yes no vote, and there's a voting period and a grace period. The grace period is where kind of like a minority can exit. Like if they don't agree with what the majority is proposing, they can exit the DAO before the proposal even passes. So whatever like the outcomes of the execution of that proposal, they can exit and like maybe take funds out of the treasury that were theirs, their fair share of the treasury, or things like that. But you have a voting period and a grace period. We've experimented with shrinking those things down and seeing how that worked. We had one issue where it was just way too short, and we were on a side chain, and the DAO kind of exploded overnight because of a rabbit hole campaign. And we weren't expecting this, and all of a sudden there was 4,000 members in this DAO. They all had put in just a little bit of money, and for that they got like this rabbit hole NFT. And it exploded. All of a sudden there was money in the treasury, and we were like, well, what is this DAO actually going to do? And we started like talking about different initiatives. But then someone else decided something that would be cool to do is spam attack the DAO. And so since it was on a side chain, there's nothing like keeping a spam bot from just hammering on something, because it's on Gnosis chain, it's like fractions of a penny to make a proposal. So someone submitted 40,000 proposals within like an hour, and just like some bot just running and cranking out proposals. what that ended up doing was an already like too loaded DAO with too short of times. Now it's impossible to figure out like what's a valid proposal, what's not. And even on the front ends that were built around it couldn't handle that much data. So it was hard for people to even see what was going on. So then people started, trying to sneak in bad proposals. And that became kind of a crazy battle of trying to save funds and wind that thing down before it caused any more trouble. It also, those were kind of the things that inspired a lot of the Moloch v3 stuff. So Moloch v2 was really kind of rigid around those settings. In v3, we have much more flexibility with being able to control the voting periods and the grace periods and if the token's transferable or not, and like being able to mint and burn shares or loot. There's a 2-token system through proposals, and the DAO governance can control all the different aspects of this flexibility. There's even like spam prevention things where you can kind of require offering to make a proposal to prevent spam. That doesn't have to be much, but a lot of those kind of experiments, both successes and failures in the past, informed the way we wanted to do Moloch v3. And now that Moloch v3 is out and audited, and we've got like a JavaScript framework around it to help build apps really quick, we're already onto like v4 because we're like, oh, well, now we should do this and this and this. So it's just going to be a never-ending kind of just continue experimenting, continue stress testing, more and more communities trying things. We haven't figured out everything yet, not even close. So we'll just keep going.
What would you say some of the biggest problems or areas for improvement?
I think it goes into a lot of like what we've been talking about. I think like figuring out ways to do more inclusive kind of sense making in a DAO and information sharing, but not overloading with proposals. I also think it's really important to continue figuring out as much, like the decentralized part, I think is really super important, and that we continue going down the route of figuring out ways to get things on chain, get the UX better, make it so users really see the benefit of having decentralized organizations and the decentralized tech around it. Yeah, the compromises, I think, are the one thing that we're seeing a lot of, and that's where we're getting like Twitter handles /DAO kind of things. And I think that trend is over now, but still, we just got to be careful of those compromises.
That was one of the points that I wanted to go through, like DAO purism versus DAO pragmatism. But
I think that being pragmatic is actually, I mean, it's really important, especially at this point, to get anything off the ground. Just for a quick point on that, but I think it's also important for the goal to always be going towards like the core ethos of like making decentralized things work. Go 100% towards that. It may take pragmatic steps, but as long as it's like that's the goal in the future, I think we're okay. Once we start being like, well, let's just bring the lawyers in, and and why aren't we just using Chase or Wells Fargo for this? And it's just like, okay, well, we're losing the narrative when those things start happening.
right, there are lines that shouldn't be crossed, and it's sometimes hard to figure out, especially for newcomers, to like know like what got the OGs here and what do we believe in. Especially when people start spinning these narratives of like, oh, DAOs are just like online corporations, and then it becomes like, okay, then everything is okay. Then DAOs in 5 years. Where do you see DAOs in 5 years? What has changed?
In the short term, so DAOhaus has been running basically as a kind of permissioned group. It's a DAO, but it's about 30 people, the core contributors to the protocol, or to building the protocol, really. Over the next few months, we're going to be kind of handing this over to a more open, kind of more inclusive protocol governance with our house token. So that means that the current like core contributor group, WarCamp, its responsibilities are going to be totally different, and WarCamp may dissolve into something or split into several different things, but it's not going to be like the main kind of insular group where everything happens. It's time for us to actually flip that switch, because it's always been our, talking about roadmaps, that's been our goal, is to build a product that is owned protocol and is owned by all the different parties that have helped make it happen, not just the devs. So that's going to be a big shift for us. So it'll be interesting to see how the DAO starts operating that way. But, for the people that are involved in DAOhaus, we're just going to keep experimenting and building and doing DAO things, because we've already gone all in on it with our knowledge, I guess, or our careers. So I don't think we're going to shift from that, but there's going to be a lot of interesting things. DAOhaus in 5 years, I think the protocol could be a core kind of base technology that every DAO uses in some way, as a public good, that all open source. And the DAO space in general, I think, kind of goes to what I was saying at the very beginning. Like, I think there could be millions of DAOs in the future. Everything from your local HOA to your local government to even like large nation-sized governments. But I think it takes a shift in kind of our perspective, that we're not bound by our geography on where we call our home. Right now we have this infinite space of value-aligned, purpose-driven organizations where we can choose to be a part of whatever one we want. And so, we won't be holding one passport that's governed by these borders and tanks and stuff. We'll be citizens of this new DAOverse, where we're maybe citizens of hundreds or thousands of different nations. And so, yeah, that's where I see this stuff going.
Well said. Yeah, I love that you're talking about DAO as more as a protocol than a platform, and you're already like with V3, it's already become a lot more modular, and it has the SDK and stuff. That's really awesome.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, this was fun, man. I wish, we could talk more, and I think this would go on for hours, but maybe it's better that it doesn't go for hours.
Yeah. I tend to just to talk about whatever comes into my brain at the second. Sometimes I'll let other people talk, but
it was great.
it was awesome hanging out, man. Thank you.
Yeah, man. And looking forward to seeing you in Denver.
Yeah, totally. I'm not living in Denver anymore, so it's gonna be fun to go back.
Cool, man. All right. Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you everybody for listening, and see you around.
Yep. Thanks, Pete.